This is a guy that now for 2 years now has produced at a very high level, at an all-conference caliber level, first-team all-conference caliber level last season in the Big 12 offensively. So by adding him, you're saying this is immediately a guy that's going to step in and be playing 30 minutes per game and probably averaging 15 points per game, just as he did at Texas Tech, because he's done it at this level against this level of competition. Pay heed, all who enter, and beware of this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, and I'm here, of course, as always, with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. We have a very exciting show today as we're recording on Tuesday afternoon. Some big news, some big movement on the recruiting front for Kansas basketball with a big target that we've been talking about. We're going to break that down a little bit more today. Also, Kansas did get a commitment over the weekend that we didn't touch on yet, so we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Another player added to their roster. We'll break him down a little bit. Plus, Kansas still has a coaching opening, so we'll provide a little brief update on that. And on the football side, Kansas got a commitment as well, so later on in the show, we'll talk a little bit about that also. So stay tuned for that. Before we really dive into things, though, I did want to make mention of a couple things. On Tuesday, Dan Fitzgerald, head coach for Kansas baseball, was named the Big 12 Coach of the Year for KU's impressive season. And we had the chance to speak with him earlier in the week on Monday. So if you haven't already, please, I would highly encourage you to go check that out. Dan Fitzgerald's such a wonderful man. He's a fantastic coach, and he's an even better interview. He's great to talk to, always so insightful. So would highly encourage you to go check that out. You can find it on your feed on Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. So check that out. Of course, Kansas is going to kick off their postseason run in the Big 12 tournament coming up on Thursday. So, show some love for KU baseball as they get ready for the Big 12 postseason and then ultimately the NCAA tournament for the first time in 10 years. So, and of course, as always, if you haven't already, please subscribe on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN, on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on social media at Payheed KCSN on Twitter. Kevin's at KFlaherty KCSN. I'm at Nick Springer 29. Tons of ways to get in contact with the show. We, of course, love it when people share their thoughts in the comments on YouTube. You can also use a 5-star rating and review. Lots of ways to interact with the show, and we really appreciate it when those of you do so. So please subscribe if you have not already. It takes one click, and we're looking to get to 1,000 on our YouTube channel. So really appreciate those of you that have already done so. And if you haven't, again, it's just one click. So go ahead and get that done. All right, let's dive in here, Kevin, with the breaking news up the top. As we record on Tuesday afternoon, let's rewind a little bit to earlier in the day on Tuesday, in which John Rothstein, who at this point I think most college basketball fans are familiar with who John Rothstein is. He is the man that eats, sleeps, and breathes college basketball and does nothing else. He tweeted out on a Tuesday morning around 10 a.m. Central Time, Darrion Williams has officially withdrawn from the 2025 NBA draft. Williams, of course, the transfer from Texas Tech, averaged 15 points per game last season with 5.5 rebounds and 3.6 assists for the Red Raiders. And this is not an entirely unexpected move from us. We've been talking about Darrion Williams quite a bit over the past really month or so at this point as a top target for Kansas, possibly in the transfer portal. And the question was, would he return to college or would he stay in the NBA draft? And we've now seen both sides of this coin, right? With Cedric Coward, who Kansas was briefly in on and then ended up committing to Duke. He was a guy that it seemed like was more likely to stay in college versus go to the NBA. He goes to the combine, gets great feedback. Now he's headed towards the NBA. That domino really kind of impacted Kansas with the whole Dame Star situation. This one is the reverse of that. Darrion Williams had publicly been pretty committed to the NBA draft, but now he's decided to withdraw and come back to college. And he immediately becomes two things. Number one, the most coveted recruit in the transfer portal at this point, considering his production. And number two, he also automatically becomes KU's top target and probably already has been KU's top target. And that is reflected in the fact that then it's been reported on Tuesday afternoon that Darrion Williams has made it to Lawrence. He's already on campus for a visit. So the devil works hard, but perhaps Bill Self works harder in this case, getting Darrion Williams on campus. Kevin, what's your reaction to that, to him withdrawing, Kansas getting him on campus, and maybe where things go from here?
Look, we've said for, it feels like months now, Nick, that this is going to be a process, that Darrion Williams was going to go into the NBA draft. He was somebody that KU had going to that process, he was somebody that KU had a really good shot at, but he was going to go through the combine and he was going to let things play out. And so everybody wanted this to be sealed up a month ago, but that wasn't realistic. And I think the first domino, as it will, had to fall was, hey, him just deciding to come back to college. Well, that domino has fallen. The next domino is, hey, can Kansas get him? And I think it's amazing how quickly, the announcement comes out that he's not doing the NBA thing, and all of a sudden you blink and he's in Lawrence. Look, I think most people would say the Jayhawks are the favorites in this one. I think Kansas kind of needs to be in the favorites in this one. It's something where there aren't a whole lot of other options, especially you have other options to potentially fill out your roster, right? Where you don't necessarily have a lot of options for is getting that legitimate sort of second star player to go along with Darren Peterson. Flory Badunga is going to be a different kind of star, but somebody to sort of help carry the scoring load that's going to be out there offensively every night and be a guy that can get you 15 to 20 plus on any given night. There aren't many of those guys left, and Darrion Williams is probably the best fit for Kansas among those guys left. And so to get him on campus is a big deal. We always say on this show, Nick, though, if you get them on campus, do not let them leave. Go ahead and lock this thing up. And he does have some other options. NC State and Ohio State are kind of the two that I think most people bring up. I think returning to Texas Tech was seen as an option, but Texas Tech has done pretty well in the portal, and the fit there maybe isn't what it used to be. But this is a thing that isn't done as of right now, 4:00. But you kind of want Kansas to go ahead and get this thing done, because I think in addition to, hey, that makes you a contender to be a top 5, top 10 roster in college basketball. Bart Torvik's stuff is kind of fun to play around with. If you add Darrion Williams to what KU currently has, KU jumps up to number 8 in the country. Of course, some of that stuff is off. For instance, I think Flory is KU's like number 6 guy, and he won't be that next year. But the point is just that Darrion Williams puts you sort of in that sweet spot where now you're just looking to fill out your roster with those last few sort of key pieces. Without Darrion Williams, though, you've got a star-sized hole. I think that it's becoming increasingly unclear how you would fill that spot.
Yeah, one of the cardinal rules that we live by here on the show when it comes to transfer portal recruiting is don't let him leave campus uncommitted.
Yeah.
We just saw what happened with Kansas with Dame Sarr. In this era with the transfer portal and how quickly things move, right? You could feel like you maybe have a guy locked down when he's on campus, but if he doesn't sign on the dotted line and somebody else is able to get him to their place, or, obviously we know how much NIL can factor in some cases, you never know what could happen. So that's kind of the cardinal rule that we live by, and we'll see if Kansas can possibly get it done. The one positive here, Kevin, is that there's actually a recruiting dead period, I believe, that is going to be starting coming up later this week. So it's going to be a situation where Kansas has him right now, and he may not have a chance to get anywhere else before that dead period. So that could be a big boost potentially for Kansas as well. And yeah, I echo a lot of sentiment that you mentioned there with Darrion Williams, because I mean, you said it yourself. You feel like this team needs a secondary scorer that would be their number 2 guy, right? Like you mentioned, Flory, you feel like he's going to be a dynamic player, but in other ways, right? Maybe defensively, shot blocking, that type of way. Maybe not necessarily as a scoring threat consistently. You look who they brought in via the transfer portal, guys that we think are great fits, but you think about a Melvin Council, not really a guy that's I think is going to be a huge scorer. Trey White, kind of the same deal. Jaden Dawson seems like a guy that could be an explosive scorer, but maybe not a consistent number 2 guy, right? That is very obviously what this Kansas roster is missing right now from a starting perspective. And Darrion Williams checks all those boxes. He was a really strong scorer at the Big 12 level at Texas Tech, and that's kind of my big takeaway here is this is a pretty low risk transfer addition from the standpoint of this is a guy that now for 2 years now has produced at a very high level, at an all-conference caliber level, first-team all-conference caliber level last season in the Big 12 offensively. So by adding him, you're saying this is immediately a guy that's going to step in and be playing 30 minutes per game and probably averaging 15 points per game, just as he did at Texas Tech, because he's done it at this level against this level of competition. That's the one huge thing, and that's really, I think, what this Kansas team is missing. When we talked about Dame Sarr's ceiling maybe on a night to night basis could be higher, but maybe you wouldn't get that consistency that you should be getting with Darrion Williams, who's going to be coming in as a polished player, as a guy who's ready to step up and immediately start scoring right away. On the flip side of that, if you want to look at maybe some of the negatives of Darrion Williams, he's not the biggest guy in the world, right?
Yeah.
I think he was 6'4" 3/4 without shoes on. Obviously, you play with shoes, so that's a positive. So you don't have to worry about that.
They won't let him do that.
So, you're talking about a 6'5", 6'6" probably guy in shoes, but he does have pretty decently long arms.
Actually, he had shorter arms at the combine.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
That was one of the bigger knocks on him was I think he had like a 6'6" wingspan or something like that. So he didn't have long arms either. But yeah.
But yeah, from that standpoint, you think about, could there be maybe a little bit of a step back in terms of the defensive prowess there? Could you think about, he's not really a guy that's going to wow you with dynamic athleticism. He's not going to play above the rim. But on the flip side, you look at the rest of the roster that Kansas has, you've got Flaherty, you've got Darren Peterson, you've got Melvin Council, guys that are very athletic. And the other aspect of this from Darrion Williams is that he's a proven 3-point shooter. So he's a guy that is really going to draw attention to himself on the perimeter, and somebody that opposing defenses have to be aware of as a perimeter shooter. Well, which again, I think that part is important. Maybe not so much necessarily his percentage as it is he's a guy that can knock him down if you leave him open, which I think is something that's noteworthy. He's a career just under 38% 3-point shooter. So pretty quality 3-point shooter, and a guy that you certainly will have to pay attention to on the perimeter. So that's nice too as well. But yeah, he really does slot in, I think, perfectly as a starter for Kansas. Really checks all the boxes. Again, I think if you want to look at Knox, maybe defense would be something where you'd say that's not his strongest suit. But I think if you're guaranteed to get real plus performance at the offensive end, considering everything else you have on the roster, I think you live with the fact that maybe he might not be the greatest defender in the world, right? I think you live with that, considering the circumstances, because it's pretty obvious Kansas is missing a secondary scorer, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think, where his weakness shows up is in space, right? And if guys get by him in space, you've got Flory Badunga behind you. So that tends to make the defense play up a little bit, in that it's not that he's an indifferent defender, like he does try on that end. He's a smart player. You see the IQ come out, and so it's not like he's leaving guys wide open or anything like that. It's, hey, somebody might be able to take him off the bounce, but in this case, if they do, he's got a backline guy that's going to be able to erase some of those mistakes. And I'm glad you brought up the shooting part, because I think his shooting and the fact that he can play the 3 and the 4 and did both at Tech gives Kansas the chance to match up in some different ways depending on what they want to do. And if you want to have a lineup out there that's maybe a little more defensively inclined, maybe he is your 4 and you have some of the other guys out there. If you wanted to be maybe a little bit more 4 stretching, you can have a guy like Trey White out there at the 4 who shoots well for a 4, Williams at the 3. You roll out Jaden Dawson, a guy that can really shoot, has a lot of range, and then Darren Peterson. All of a sudden, you're putting 4 guys on the court that can space the floor and really open things up for pick and roll opportunities. And that's another thing, Nick. Darrion Williams is a good ball handler off of ball screens and can get to his spots off the dribble. And I think that that's a valuable piece to have as well at that 3 or 4 spot, because I think when you look at the issues that KU's had the last couple years, shooting is one that obviously people point to pretty quickly. Another part, and maybe just as big a part, was the guys that KU thought were going to be guys that were going to slash and get to the rim and really be able to attack closeouts and get their own shot off the bounce. They didn't pan out either. And so Kansas not only didn't have the shooting, they didn't have the shot creation. Whereas if you get Williams, I think shot creation becomes a fairly big strength of this team between EA and Peterson on the same team.
The last transfer that Kansas had, Kevin, that I think did all the things you just described very well, happened to also be from Lubbock, and that would be Mr. Kevin McCullough. So something to keep in mind there. But yeah, certainly, as you said, when you think about lineup combinations, virtually every lineup combination you could think of has me excited with Darrion Williams in there. Like I think there's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of possibilities there that Kansas can work with Darrion Williams in the lineup. And this is obviously a recruitment that we will be keeping a very close eye on, and we'll certainly be diving much deeper into Darrion Williams should he choose Kansas. Of course, we'll see how that plays out. You mentioned it earlier, NC State with Will Wade. You know, he's very aggressively trying to build a high quality roster at NC State. So NC State's probably a team to watch as well. I think Ohio State's been mentioned also. So it's not over. And obviously, I think hopefully KU fans have learned the lesson a little bit with the Dame Sarr situation where it ain't over till it's over. So, we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but certainly this is the guy that you and I have had our eyes on for a while, and somebody that is very obviously KU's top priority at the moment in the transfer portal. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to hit on the fact that Kansas still does not have they have not filled their coaching position opening. We'll talk about that a little bit. And Kansas did get a commitment. So they do have another player that's going to be joining them for the 2025 season. We'll touch on that as well coming up on the other side. Of course, the break gives us a chance to remind you that you should be shopping at homefieldapparel.com using the promo code PAY24. You can find 40 plus great Kansas items at homefieldapparel.com. I'm rocking the Jayhawks. So I call it kind of the baseball script.
I was going to say, you said earlier, show love for the baseball team, and I feel like you're showing love right now for the baseball team.
So this is a great shirt. I think if you want to support the baseball team, they've also got a great KU hat. I had a friend of mine came and visited. He was rocking the KU hat. It looks really clean, so you can check that out. And you can support Kansas with 40-plus items. You can support also 140 other schools as well. The Indy 500 is coming up next weekend, or this weekend, I should say, and they have some motorsports apparel as well if you're into that kind of thing like I am. So check all that out, and be sure to use the promo code PAYHEED24 for 15% off your first order. And more KU basketball talk is coming up next. Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
It's playoff time, and if you're still just watching games, then you're missing out. With Pick 6 from DraftKings, you can turn your hoops knowledge into real cash. Just make your picks, track your score, and if you hit all 6, you're looking at bigger payouts than Prize Picks Flex Plays. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competitor, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. And right now, new customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the Payee Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. Of course, we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Some great conversation about Darrion Williams we just had before the break. He is on campus on Tuesday afternoon as we record, visiting KU. That's certainly one to keep a close eye on as things continue to unfold for Kansas and they try to fill out the rest of their roster. They're also trying to fill out, Kevin, the rest of their coaching staff. They do still have an opening on their coaching staff. We talked a little bit about this last week about the possibility of Kansas looking to reunite a former player with the coaching staff, and it seems like Jacques Vaughn continues to be sort of the name to watch there. There was some, I think, when you think about this with Jacques Vaughn, I think this was a situation, and this is a situation where Kansas certainly has a lot of interest in, I think, possibly bringing him back. But the question was, did Jacques Vaughn want the job, right? And for whatever reason, he hasn't been in coaching for a little bit. So for whatever reason, that may have been something to keep in mind. But that continues to seemingly be the direction Kansas wants to go. I think it makes sense. You'll get a lot of KU fans excited, right? I think it's anytime there's a guy like that was that quality of player at KU, I think you'll see a lot of fans react positively to that versus maybe just going out and getting some generic assistant from some other school or something like that. So you do have that appeal. I think it'll definitely get fans excited. And it makes a lot of sense, like we talked about before, that he has a strong NBA background, obviously coached in the NBA, was a head coach in the NBA, and so can provide sort of that perspective, and is also somebody that more than likely is not just going to be a yes man, but is actually going to bring in a bit more of an outside perspective that could be a little bit of a fresh change for KU as well.
Yeah, and I think Kansas fans have looked at the offense the last couple of years and have not been satisfied. And I think we've talked about how it's been tough kind of with the scheme fits and all the different things to have a more modern looking offense with the guys that they had. I think if you look at where KU was at actually in 23, when they got a number 1 seed, Bill Self wound up having the health issues and they wound up getting knocked out in the second round. But I think you look at that team, what they were running was fairly NBA centric. When you looked at KJ at the 5, the pick and roll stuff that they were running off of KJ, the short roll stuff that they were involving KJ in. And I think bringing Jacques Vaughn in gives you a chance to maybe add to some of those wrinkles, because you are going to have an NBA point guard. You are theoretically going to have an NBA center as well, and a guy that executes pick and roll really well in Flory. And a guy, I'll be honest, Nick, I didn't know Flory could pass like that. Flory had some great passes this year. And so I think there are some interesting things you can do off of that. When you look at the shooting ability of a guy like Jaden Dawson, finding ways to kind of open up shooters is not necessarily something that Bill Self has done a ton within his offense. And I'm not saying Jacques Vaughn is going to bring all of those things. I'm just saying if he brings 1 or 2, from the NBA of, oh yeah, we had a really good guard shooter. Here's what we ran to get him open when we needed to get an outside shot. Something like that could be such a tremendous benefit. And I think it's kind of funny, Nick, because obviously you and I are on verbal commitment, which we talk to a lot of high school kids for that. High school kids are not going to remember Jacques Vaughn playing. It was before their time at KU, and even though they would have been alive probably to see some of him in the NBA, that's not something they're going to do. Who did remember him playing is their parents. And so a lot of times that can help from a recruiting perspective as well. When Jacques Vaughn walks into a room and people say, oh my God, it's Jacques Vaughn. And so that's where you can see some of that recruiting impact from having a former All-American, star player, NBA player, et cetera, on your staff can help in that respect. But to your point, I think the bringing in new ideas and sort of, hey, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel's pretty good. But if you add a couple bolts in certain places to maybe solidify the wheel that weren't there beforehand, that can only help. And I think Jacques Vaughn's a guy that would do a tremendous job of something like that.
It's not a done deal, but it certainly seems like this is a situation where Kansas would like to have him. So it's just a matter of maybe ironing out some of the details before finalizing something like that. But yeah, I think it would be a really good ad for Kansas, because you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get that appeal of, hey, this is a guy that played at Kansas, obviously was highly successful, and a lot of fans, and as you said, parents will recognize that, and I think that will get a lot of people excited. But also, this is a guy who has a legitimate coaching resume that is going to bring in, probably some different perspective and ideas that could really benefit Kansas as well, right? I think that was kind of the concern. It's like, okay, well, if you're just looking to add somebody maybe that is in the quote unquote KU family or whatever, like if you're just bringing in somebody just for that, is that really worth it? No, to me, this would be a hire where you would get sort of both sides, which would be really, really cool for Kansas. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. over the course of the coming weeks if that does get done. Let's shift gears quickly to also Kansas. They did get a commitment over the weekend.
Yes.
The basketball team. They will have another member on their basketball team coming in 2025. None other than Corbin Allen, who is a Kansas City native from Oak Park High School, committed to Kansas over the weekend. Allen was previously committed to San Diego, decommitted, and comes to KU. And this is a guy, Kevin, that just initially is somebody that I think in the new era of college basketball, you see this as a situation where because of the fact that you're going to be shrinking the roster, you need more back-end players that you can utilize during practices and things like that because walk-ons are basically not going to be a thing anymore. I think that's the type of player you're getting in Corbin Allen, at least initially, right, as a real developmental player. He is a guy that actually broke Ochai Agbaji's scoring record at Oak Park, led them to a state title this past season. He was coached by Sharon Collins, by the way, as well, over at Oak Park. So certainly a lot of ties to Kansas. But this is a player that is going to be a guy that you hope can develop over time, right? You hope can develop in 2, 3, 4 years down the road into a player that can really contribute, but maybe not necessarily a guy that you expect to be contributing in 2025, but a player that nonetheless I think you can be excited about, a local kid. I think Kansas really wants to build those ties. And again, I mean, you think about what Ochai Agbaji became. I'm not saying Corbin Allen will be that, but from the same high school, he did break Ochai Agbaji's scoring record. So certainly an interesting piece that you add to the end of the bench in 2025, and maybe 2, 3 years down the road could be a guy that's a contributor for this team.
Yeah, Ochai Agbaji was a raw developmental guy from Oak Park High School. You know, he was somebody that I believe he didn't even wind up getting an offer from Missouri despite playing in Kansas City. Mm. And so he did pick up some other offers because he had a really big senior year. But even so, remember, he started off his freshman year redshirting. You know, it was he wasn't expected to be an immediate impact guy. They ultimately had some injuries, some attrition and things like that where he wound up playing and playing well and then kind of grew over the course of his career there. But I still think, and again, to your point, I'm not saying Corbin Allen is going to be Ochai Agbaji. What I am saying is that a lot of times these types of guys get slept on. And if they stay in the program and they work to develop, you know, not only do they help you in practice, as you said, a lot of times they can develop into guys that actually wind up carving out roles for you. And in Corbin Allen's case, he's a good athlete at 6'4", one of those sort of jack of all trades, master of none type of guys, you know, can get the ball where he wants to on the court, you know, is a good shooter, or a good scorer, not necessarily a great shooter. But you think about just, hey, this guy's 6'4", athletic, good frame. If he develops a shot in Lawrence, all of a sudden that's a guy you'd like to have, right? Like having a 6'4" athletic, you know, long guy that can shoot. And so I would just, I know Kansas fans at this point, because I've seen some of the comments and everything. I know Kansas fans, they want every get at this point to be a potential All-American or somebody that you know is going to plug in right away. Ultimately, you're going to have 14 guys on the roster. And ultimately, not all 14 guys are going to play major roles in the 2025-2026 season. That doesn't mean you don't still have to fill out the roster. And it doesn't mean that guys 12 through 14 aren't still important. And I think in Corbin Allen's case, it's smart in that you get a guy that is a local guy. I really enjoy that part. You know, taking a guy that's going to come in, work hard, you know, try to develop. Maybe he sticks around for a few years. And if he does, maybe he comes out on the other side as somebody that's in the rotation. But certainly for 25-26, you don't expect him to play a major role. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that this is a bad ad. I actually think it's a pretty solid get for where we're at on the calendar.
Yeah, and I do want to underscore the fact that by eliminating walk-ons, basically, you need players of this caliber to be sort of your practice players, right? I think we've seen Kansas over the years really utilize walk-ons in a big way in that aspect, and that's kind of going away, really, essentially, with the revenue share and roster limits and all that stuff. So, type of player that could be really beneficial on the practice floor, a guy that maybe you don't see what he's doing on game days, but could still be really helping out practice-wise. And then the end of what you said there, I think, was really important too, Kevin, because this is also a player that more than likely is not going to be somebody who's going to just jump ship and try to transfer after a year or two, right? Local guy, coached by Sharon Collins, very, very strong KU ties. This is the type of player that Bill Self can take and feel comfortable of being able to say, hey, we're going to develop you and mold you over the course of 2-3 years into a player that into the player that you want to become. And how often have we said on the show that is one of Bill Self's best traits? It's been one of his best traits for a long time. I mean, the list goes on and on of guys that were under recruited that developed into really, really quality players for Kansas. You mentioned Ochai Agbaji. You think about a Christian Brown. You think about Frank Mason and Devontae Graham. Like, there's a long list of players really that were under recruited and have developed into very, really, really quality players at Kansas. And so this is a guy that I think you can feel confident in saying, hey, you're going to be here for a couple, 2-3 years with a chance to really, really hone your skills at Kansas versus bringing in, a freshman who maybe is more higher rated, right? Everyone wants to look at ratings. Maybe you bring in a guy that's higher rated, but he's going to go transfer after one season. That's probably not going to be Corbin Allen, which I think is sort of maybe an underrated detail of his commitment as well. So let's shift gears. We're going to take a quick break. We'll shift gears. Going to touch on another commitment that happened on the football side. Kansas football added a new player that's going to be joining them for 2025 as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what that could mean coming up next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
This is the Payee Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, here with Kevin Flaherty. Of course, we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC. If you have not already, what are you waiting for? Please subscribe. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. On our YouTube channel, we are striving for 1,000 subscribers. So thank you so much if you have already subscribed. If you haven't, it takes one click on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. If you have subscribed on Apple, Spotify, we thank you as well. You can leave a 5-star rating and review, leave a comment, share your thoughts, join the conversation. We love hearing from KU fans. We love creating a space for KU fans to share their thoughts on the state of the program and so on and so forth, both on the football and basketball side as well. So really appreciate those of you that have already done all those things, and we hope you continue to do so and continue to support the show. Let's shift a little bit onto the football side, Kevin, with a commitment that Kansas got recently for football. This is from the JUCO ranks, actually, on the offensive line. Offensive tackle Antonio Wilson out of Garden City Community College. This is a very big-bodied, big-framed player at 6'6", 320 pounds at a Garden City Community College. Will join that offensive line room for Kansas. And this, to me, reads as Kansas maybe recognizing that they don't necessarily have things fully solidified on the offensive line. When you look at that group, we talked about it earlier in the spring in our position breakdown. You feel really good about Bryce Foster, obviously. You feel pretty good about Calvin Clements locking down the left side at the left tackle position. You feel pretty good on the interior with Kobe Baines. Maybe there's some opportunities for some other guys at the guard position. It's really kind of that right tackle spot that obviously Bryce Cabledew had locked down for so many years that maybe you're saying, okay, what's the solution there for Kansas? They go out in the transfer portal. They add in a transfer from Syracuse and Enrique Cruz. And now they've also brought in Tabake. I'm going to butcher his last name. I'm not even going to try it. Tamake
Ricolovatu
from UCLA, who I think could be a tackle or guard. Now they've gone out and got another guy as a tackle prospect in Antonio Wilson. What's your assessment of this commitment, Kevin? And what do you think this means possibly for maybe just the competition in general on that offensive line heading into 2025?
Yeah, Antonio Wilson played both tackle spots at Garden City. And so you've got tape of him both at left tackle and at right tackle. And I think there's still a little bit of rawness there where I don't know that he's somebody that when you look at Enrique Cruz and the experience that he has, I think he would probably be the favorite to land that right tackle spot opposite Calvin Clements. But you need guys after that. And Nolan Gorska has been a solid, swing guy within the program. He's going to factor into that conversation. They felt like they needed somebody else. And Antonio Wilson has the size. He's got, I think, 3 years of eligibility left. So it's not necessarily just a swing for this year. He's somebody that can be on the 2 deep this year. Push Jack Tanner as well as a guy that transferred in as a tackle. And so he's somebody that can hop in and join that mix. I think, too, with his size and with his strength, Nick, and the strength pops on tape. You can really see it as a tackle, when he locks out his arms, I mean, guys aren't moving. He is moving people off of their spots. And so it's also possible that he could come in and give them, sort of a swing guard tackle guy where they could work him a little bit at guard as a powerful guy that could be on the interior. I think Tamake Tuikolavatu was a guy that I figured would factor in at right tackle, but ultimately sort of find a spot in the starting lineup at that guard spot opposite Kobe Baines. And if that winds up happening and you have a guy like Antonio Wilson to develop that you feel like, hey, this guy can play either tackle spot, maybe he could even slide inside. It's a good take. And I'll say this too, Nick, as somebody that kind of follows the recruiting thing and everything, this is becoming more and more common. And by this, I mean, you have the portal cycle and everything. People get out to the junior colleges and scout them in the spring. And a lot of times there are guys out there at the junior colleges that are eligible to leave their junior college and go play somewhere immediately. And so if you're looking in the portal and you like your guys, but maybe you want to add one more, maybe your trip out to Garden City, you see, okay, they've got this really big offensive tackle out here. We didn't necessarily want him in December or February as part of this recruiting class, but now knowing where our roster is, we have room for this guy. I think it's something you're seeing more and more. It sucks with the JUCOs because, obviously you go into spring ball at that JUCO thinking, hey, we've got our starting left tackle. He's a stud. And the next thing you know, he's not on your roster anymore. But that's part of life at that level. But this is something that you are seeing more and more of, where colleges are saying, hey, we need to go find another running back. There's a really good running back at Butler Community College that can enroll in the summer. Let's go get that guy, even though they didn't necessarily view him as a priority before. And so I think Antonio Wilson's a pretty solid get at this point.
Yeah, this feels like a very low risk, potentially high reward in the future type of move, right? And I think based off of his size and strength, like you highlighted, that alone, I think, says, okay, this is a player that, hey, if we can mold him into our system, if we can sort of develop him on sort of more the football side, right, into our scheme and what we want to do, like he's already got the size and the strength and maybe the physical tools. It's just a matter of, hey, can Darrion Williams, mold that into something where he can become a really quality player for Kansas down the line. And again, I think this also kind of highlights another point that we've mentioned with KU in the past, is that, when Lance Leipold and his staff diagnose an area that they think where they could use some more depth or an area of need, they attack it very aggressively. And so this to me also reads as another move of, okay, we have a number of different guys in this offensive line room that we feel pretty good about, that we think are going to be competing for the starting job. But hey, what if we bring in one more guy at the back end of the roster with a lot of size and strength that maybe he's going to really challenge these other guys and bring out the best of some of our guys that we think can start this year, while also developing into somebody that maybe in 2 or 3 years becomes our starter, right? So I think that kind of reflects on this move as well of we have a number of guys in the offensive line room that we like, but here's another one that is a big guy that we think can maybe challenge these guys in different ways and set up this roster to be better. Because so many times throughout spring, I mean, the buzzword was competition from KU football. And I think we even heard it from guys like Jim Panagos going back to last season, how this was such a senior-laden roster for Kansas. They had so many veteran players that they maybe lost that element a little bit of competition, because there were so many guys with so much experience that have been playing for so long together that it was, hey, these are our starting, 22 players or 20 players basically because of it. Whereas it feels like coming into this season, into 2025, I think Kansas has gotten back to what Lance Leipold and by extension guys like Matt Gildersleeve, the strength and conditioning coach, and the coordinators, maybe what they more want them to be on a year-to-year basis, which is, it's basically an open competition every spring, every summer, into fall camp. It's starting jobs up for grabs all over the place. And I think Kansas has gotten back to that this spring, which again, I don't really think that's necessarily a negative of the team last season, but it feels like it's an important element of what Lance Leipold's sort of core philosophy is. I think in some cases is that intense internal competition. So having that back, I think also not only in the offensive line room, as we just talked about, but really in totality for the team could be, I think, something that would really benefit Kansas. And it's not even something that you maybe can directly point to. I don't know that it's a quantifiable thing, but it feels like it could have a benefit for Kansas coming into 2025.
Yeah, I agree. It's human nature, right? Like if you're a young wide receiver and you come in and there's open spots for playing time, you're going to prepare a little bit differently and work differently because, one, I mean, you don't want to be put in the game and you're not ready. But two, you want to make a case that you deserve to play. And even if you came in with the right mentality and all those things as a young wide receiver, you're walking out on the practice field and there's LJ Arnold, Luke Graham, and Quentin Skinner who started 80 bajillion games. And so even if the coaches are sitting there saying, hey, it's an open competition, and even if they mean it, as a player, it's only natural to look at that and be like, well, they say it's an open competition, but these guys, have 100 starts between them. I'm probably not going to break through that group to get onto the field. And so it's just human nature that you prepare a little bit differently when you don't have that. When I covered Texas, one of the things that Mac Brown used to talk about, he wanted to eliminate the redshirt year, but have 5 years of eligibility. And the reason he wanted to do that was he said, a lot of kids don't develop as much as they should as freshmen because they're redshirting. So they're like, well, I'm not going to play this year. So they approach practice differently. They don't work as hard in the classroom. A lot of times you almost see a lack of growth for those guys because they don't see a path to the field with where they're at that point in time. And so when you have, that's all a really long way to say, when you have competition and guys can see that it's legitimately competition and I legitimately have a chance and I need to be prepared because my number could get called on, it is different. And it does sort of permeate the program right now. I think it was noticeable in the spring. Like you said, it's not quantifiable. You can't hold up like a Geiger counter or something. Like, okay, we're at 13, competitions today. Like that's good, but it is a positive thing. One other thing I'll say about the addition of Antonio Wilson, and I mean, I did not major in math as so many journalism people did not. I believe this puts KU at 86 scholarships. And so I think something that I would do is keep an eye on the roster to see, hey, is Kansas going to lose a scholarship person at this point? I don't know that it would be like that because the portal's, no longer open. But if not, I think it's interesting because we had heard, sort of for so long that, hey, even with the scholarship changes and all the things happening and the roster limits, KU was going to stay right around that 85 and probably clip it at about 85 and go through with the rest of the roster being walk-ons. My question had always been, okay, theoretically, you're at 85. If the right player comes along, is KU going to say, you know what, we'll go to 86, we'll go to 87 if they feel like they need to have those guys, at least in this case, based on what we know right now. And, assuming my math is correct, it does appear that maybe KU is willing to go above that limit if it is the right guy or two that they feel like can help them have a chance.
One of the main reasons why I majored in journalism, Kevin, is specifically to not take math classes. And in fact, I avoided taking my math prerequisite for multiple years at KU. So I'm right there with you. But yeah, that is an intriguing aspect of it as well, is the numbers side also, keeping an eye on that. So you got anything else to add, Kevin, before we wrap up the show here today?
No, we covered a bunch of stuff. Congrats to Coach Fitz. Like you said, I do highly recommend you guys go and take a look at that interview. I feel like my baseball IQ always jumps about 50 points after talking to him, and he has such a great way of explaining his thought processes and sort of the why behind how he makes different decisions. And I thought the other thing that was interesting about that interview, Nick, you asked him, hey, what about this year is replicable for KU in the future. I think that's an answer that was good to pay attention to as well, because obviously the season's not over yet, a lot to play for, but Kansas it potentially has the right things in place to continue on being a successful baseball program. I don't think this is going to be a one-off deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And you certainly hope it isn't a one-off as well. And I think from talking to Dana Fitzgerald, neither you or I feel like it's going to be a one-off. So you should definitely, as Kevin said, go check out that interview. Keep an eye out for that. Please subscribe on all of our platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your audio, and on the YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. Join the conversation, subscribe, drop a comment, share your thoughts. We love hearing from you guys as always. And of course, we'll be keeping a close eye on the Darrion Williams recruitment as it continues to unfold. And if anything does happen, we'll be talking about that some more as well. We actually have some more KU football position breakdowns to get to as well. Believe it or not, we got a little bit sidetracked. We still have to get back to that. But if you're looking for more KU football content, we've been breaking down every position group throughout the spring. You can go back into our archives, find some of those episodes. If you're thinking to yourself, man, what's the O-line going to look like? Can I get a more in-depth breakdown? We got you covered. Oh, what about the wide receivers? Boom, got you covered. Oh, what about the linebackers? 3 new transfers. Boom, got you covered. You can check out any of those shows back in our archive from throughout spring ball as well. But until next time, he is Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer, and we'll talk to you again very soon. See ya.